With the fall of Sumter, President Lincoln was compelled to call upon the states for 75,000 3 months volunteers to resist, as he would later say, force employed for the government's destruction by force for its preservation. With Virginia's formal secession on May 23rd and strong secession sentiment brewing in Maryland, the federal capital was imperiled. The period before Lincoln's 90-day men began arriving proved to be an anxious time for the new president. Day after day passed with little more than rumors to defend Washington, but by the end of June, the crisis had passed, Washington was secure, and Northerners clamored for action. Winfield Scott, Lincoln's commanding general, was not inclined to the sort of offensive action that would require vast armies that simply did not exist. Scott proposed a close blockade of southern ports and a limited expedition down the Mississippi. This Anaconda plan made strategic sense and would indeed prove fundamental to a Union victory, but it would not answer the swelling and popular chorus for action. By early July, it was clear to President Lincoln that he had to use his 90-day army or lose it. Lincoln and General Scott sat down with Generals Irvin McDowell and Montgomery Meigs and held something of a war council to develop a plan of operation. Meigs was of the opinion that the war could not be won without beating the rebels, and since they had come to us, it was better to whip them here than to go far into unhealthy country and fight them. McDowell, whose army was little more than a patriotic mob, pleaded for time that no longer existed to train and discipline his troops. "You are green, it is true," said the president, "but they are green also. You are all green alike." McDowell's plan of attack was as sound as it was simple. He would demonstrate against rebel-held fords and bridges with a portion of his force, while marching his main army around the Confederate left and cross Bull Run at an undefended ford. Unfortunately, the plan was dependent on a small Union force in the Shenandoah tying down Joe Johnston's 11,000 troops at Winchester. Johnston's timely arrival on the battlefield sealed the Union's fate. A battle that had begun well for the Union had turned into a stinging defeat, and a realization on the part of the administration that the struggle ahead would be much longer and costlier than anticipated. In the words of one dispirited and defeated Yankee after straggling back into Washington, "We are beat, and badly, because we have no generals, no competent officers." General George B. McClellan was summoned to Washington the day after Bull Run. The epitome of a professional soldier, the 34-year-old West Point graduate had been put in charge of the Department of the Ohio, and with an army of 20,000 had cleared a Confederate force from western Virginia. It was something of a deceptive victory, as McClellan had allowed many of the rebel troops to escape. Writing years later, a subordinate of McClellan's during this campaign stated that the general showed the same characteristics that became well known later. There was the same overestimate of the enemy, the same tendency to interpret unfavorably the sights and sounds in front, the same hesitancy to throw in his force when he knew a subordinate was engaged. But a victory is a victory, and McClellan was the closest thing the Union had to a hero at that propitious moment. McClellan was not quite prepared for the adulation afforded a conquering hero. "I find myself in a strange position here," he wrote to his wife Mary Ellen on the 27th of July. "President, Cabinet, General Scott, all deferring to me. By some strange operation of magic, I seem to have become the power of the land." Going further, the general told his wife that he had already seen the main causes for our recent failure, and I'm sure that I can remedy these, and am confident that I can lead these armies of men to victory once more. The first half of this boast was absolutely true. When it came to organizing and training armies, McClellan was without peer. He was a tireless administrator who spent his days in the saddle and his nights consumed in paperwork. No detail was too small to escape his attention. He was constantly among his men, cared for them deeply. His troops recognized these qualities and responded with devotion. According to one soldier, there was not a man in the army who would not die for him. As for leading armies to victory, that would prove a more difficult task, but by early August, McClellan was talking of crushing the rebels in one campaign and carrying this thing en grand.